This is Everybody Pulls the Tarp with your host, Andrew Moses. Each week, Andrew talks with Olympians, pro athletes, TV stars, Grammy winners, best-selling authors, CEOs, and other high performers to uncover their success secrets.
My guest is Washington Commanders running back Austin Ekeler.
Every day we write a page of our life. The best thing is you have the pen in your hand.
Three-time Olympic gold medalist Tessa Virtue. Welcome back to Everybody Pulls the Tarp.
Thanks for thinking of me, and I'm a big fan of the podcast and of yours. So anytime you text or call, I'm here.
Mike Mills from REM.
The key to that was realizing at some point fairly early on that this was probably our life's work.
Every conversation is jam-packed with inspiration and actionable ideas.
My guest is 2023 WNBA Coach of the Year, Stephanie White.
The hardest thing for a coach is trying to prioritize how much time you put in one area or another.
Former MLB player, coach, and manager Clint Hurdle.
That is the best title of any podcast out there in America, and the content matches up to it. Andrew, you do a fantastic job. I'm a big fan. Keep up the great work.
World-renowned organizing expert Shira Gill.
You can improve your life simply by removing things.
Get ready for a behind-the-scenes look at the techniques, processes, and mindsets powering the world's most successful people.
Let's go. Hey everyone, it's Andrew, and welcome back to Everybody Pulls the Tarp. Well, friends, the conversation that I'm about to share has the power to help all of us in so many different ways. It has the power to help you overcome fears and chase that dream opportunity you've long been deferring. It has the power to help you better separate your work from who you are as a person, so you are better able to avoid having criticism of your work feel so overwhelmingly personal. And this conversation also has the power to free you if you feel frozen after a big success, fearful about what to do next, and afraid that future work will forever be judged exclusively against the work that you've created in the past. And if you are just interested in learning how one of the best at their craft goes about their work, then this conversation is for you as well. Listeners, this week my guest is New York Times bestselling author Nikki Erlick. Now, Nikki's story is inspiring, and I was so excited to sit down with her for this conversation about her career, how she does her work, and some of the most vulnerable ideas that she has wrestled with throughout it all. Now, before we go any further, I just want to say this. If you've been listening to Everybody Pulls the Tarp for a while now, welcome back. And if you are a new listener, I just want to take a moment to say how glad I am that you found the show and officially welcome you to the Everybody Pulls the Tarp family. I hope you'll hit that follow button right now in whatever podcast app you're listening to, and join me each week so we all can learn from the world's top performers together. Okay, now let me get this conversation with Nikki all set up for you. Nikki's debut novel, The Measure, was an instant New York Times bestseller when it was published back in 2022. It was selected as Jenna Bush Hager and the Today Show's Read with Jenna Book Club pick, as well as the Barnes & Noble Discover pick. After The Measure, Nikki's latest book, The Poppy Fields, was an instant USA Today bestseller and one of Amazon Books' best of 2025. Nikki's incredible work has also appeared online in New York Magazine, Newsweek, and so many more. Prior to her breakout success as a novelist, Nikki began her career working in journalism as a travel writer, after graduating Harvard University summa cum laude and serving as an editor of the Harvard Crimson. Additionally, Nikki earned a master's degree in global thought from Columbia University. Now, it was during her time as a travel writer back in 2018 that Nikki began writing The Measure in her limited spare time on nights and weekends. Fast forward to 2020, Nikki was laid off from her travel writer job as a result of the pandemic, and she went all in on her novel. She worked in solitude, often for 10 to 12 hours per day, and finished The Measure. And just as I had mentioned a moment ago, The Measure was an instant mega success. The success and acclaim was life-changing in so many positive ways, but as you will hear, for Nikki, that success also activated more fears, uncertainty, and unknowns that she had to wrestle with. Listeners, I can't wait for you to hear my conversation with Nikki. It's raw, vulnerable, and like I said at the top, filled with ideas that have the power to help all of us in a profound way. Nikki took me behind the scenes into how she works, how and where she taps into creativity, her writing process, and so much more. I am so grateful we got to have this conversation and hope you take away as much from Nikki as I have. Oh, and one more thing. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. It is not intended to be a substitute for the advice of a physician, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. So, let's pull the tarp and get straight to New York Times bestselling author Nikki Erlick. So you have said that from the age of about 6 or 7, you knew that you wanted to be a writer one day. So take me back to that moment when you knew that this was something that you wanted to pursue.
Yeah, I'm very lucky that I always just had this one dream. I mean, it's super interesting when you have the story of you went on one path for 30 years and then realized a second chapter was something else. But I've only ever had this one dream. And I loved books. I loved reading from a really young age. I'm very lucky. My grandparents were kind of the main influence for me there. They were both public school teachers all their lives and then retired by the time I was born. And so they gave me this love of learning and reading. And I think it might have been around that time in elementary school when I realized reading is not just a hobby, but also maybe a career. Like somebody has to write this book that I am reading. And I just loved it. And I wished I didn't have to go to any other part of school other than reading.
So what did that look like? I know some of your favorite books as a kid, The Giver by Lois Lowry, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith, and some others. What was it in particular that you felt like you were so drawn to that was so unique?
Yeah, I think there's some books, The Giver one you mentioned, Talk Everlasting, I think would be another, that are like books that are written for young readers, but they pose these really deep, thoughtful, existential and moral questions, which you wouldn't think are necessarily being posed to young readers, to children, but they are. And so I feel like I just was very fascinated by that, reading a book that has you thinking, what is the value of emotion? And if I could live forever, would I want to live forever? These questions for a little kid. And really the main way that you get them is through books, because they're not probably the questions that you're having at the dining room table.
So those are some pretty heavy questions for a young child to be wrestling with. Did you always feel like you connected with these stories and with the characters that you were reading? Or was it more of these really complex plot themes that you were so drawn to? It
was probably a mix of both. I think I remember reading A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, which you mentioned, and the character in that is realizing that she wants to be a writer over the course of the book. And so reading that was a very meta experience for me because the character was realizing that. I remember there's a scene where she is very struck by a phrase that somebody uses. I think the phrase is the tears stood in her eyes. And she was like, the tears stood in her eyes. I just kept thinking about that and what an interesting thing to say. And that's the exact thing that happened to me. I would just read sentences in books and just reread them over and over again and be like, this is amazing that somebody put these words together.
I've also heard you say, Nikki, in a past interview, you said that reading, and this was only in 2022, so not when you were a young child, you said reading is an adventure in empathy. As soon as you open up a book, you are empathizing with characters you've never met before. So did you realize that when you were 6, 7, 8, 9 years old?
I don't think so. I think that took a little more maturity probably. But I felt that feeling of connection I felt, and I probably didn't have the words for it. I didn't have that word empathy, but I felt some sort of connection, what that character is going through. It resonates with me.
So reading and writing, though, are two totally different things, obviously interrelated, right?
But very different. Yes, very different.
But very different. I've interviewed many, many best-selling authors over the past number of years. And I think if I recall correctly, I can only recall 1 or 2 that told me they really don't enjoy reading. That They love writing, but they don't enjoy reading. Most writers that I've encountered love reading, as you do. But talk to me about the writing side of it. When was the first time you remember writing or telling a story yourself and saying, okay, this is interesting to me, and maybe I'm actually also good at this as well?
I remember writing when I was 10 or 11. I remember starting to write poems, and they were really bad because they were very like very rigid rhyming. They were all about like me looking at a tree or something. Like it was just like things that I thought a poem was, like super strict rhyming because as if I was like a little Shakespeare or something. And like about nature because of course, like the solemnness and the awe of nature. It was like at that age, I was still how to be a writer. And like the first short story I wrote was like about an orphan, like stranded in the middle of like a war, like just a vague, undescribed war. Because I think, again, I was pretending, like thinking that's what a serious writer should write about. And it took a while for me to realize I could actually write about just things that interested me. And they didn't have to be like this sort of impersonation of like of an author.
So was writing a craft that you intentionally developed and cultivated in your teenage years and high school years, or is it something that you developed later? Talk about that.
I definitely was very intentional about it. I took sort of all my assignments in English class very seriously, and I wanted my teacher to mark up the paper and make me better. There were certainly times when I felt like it was marked up too much and I was a little upset, but I do recognize the value there. And I pursued journalism as well in high school and then in college more seriously as a way to become a better writer, to ask better questions. And that was certainly very helpful as well.
So I was going to ask you about that, Nikki. So again, going back to many of the conversations that I've had with other authors, writing novels is not necessarily something that you like necessarily say, I'm going to go to college to learn to write a novel. Like most writers go and do something else, maybe something that's adjacent to writing novels, like journalism, or something that is totally different. Talk about how you thought through that. I mean, you mentioned moments ago that like journalism you felt like was a step closer to getting to develop your craft as a writer. Talk about that decision process.
Yeah, I think journalism felt safer for me because it was less vulnerable, because I was writing about other people, I was interviewing them, and I was doing writing and like working with words, which is what I wanted to do. But I was just very like afraid of pursuing fiction writing or something that felt more like exposing of myself. And I didn't take a creative writing class until like the last semester of college, when it was like now or never. Like I have to do this. And it was scary.
So tell me more about that, because you use that word vulnerable there, and that's a big word. I'm curious, or it's a big, important kind of weighty topic.
Yeah.
So when you write fiction, it's not like you're writing the Nikki Erlick memoir. You're writing about other people. You're putting yourself in other people's shoes. What was it in particular that you felt that you were more fearful of, or what would kind of expose you more from a vulnerability perspective?
Yeah, I think it was twofold. I think both in the writing itself, even though it is fiction, you're pulling from your life, your emotions in order to shape what you're writing. And also for a long time, I was really afraid to admit like that this was my dream. I didn't tell a lot of people that I wanted to be a writer, that I wanted to write novels. I felt like people would just think, well, are you good enough? Or they would read my writing and say, no, you're not good enough. And I felt like it was scary to put words to that dream, because then that made it real. And then if I didn't achieve it, that would mean that I had failed. I'm sure this might be something that you've heard other people talk about in different career paths, but like it's scary to have something that you want so much. And it was scary for me to admit it out loud. And so I think that was part of not wanting to take the creative writing class and not want to put myself out there like that and be critiqued and maybe be told like, this isn't going to happen for you. Like, this is the wrong dream.
Right. So in a way, I mean, the stakes felt higher for you when you were thinking about creative writing, because if someone were to tell you that you weren't good enough or you weren't good at this, that would really hurt and really sting, versus maybe with the journalism, okay, like it's less personal. I can get better at that. I can develop there.
Yes, totally. And it was like with journalism, you're sort of disappearing because you're profiling another subject and the journalist shouldn't be as present in the story. But with fiction, like it's all you, your voice, you're very present.
So your early careers in journalism, many of those years were spent as a travel writer. Talk to me about that. Was travel something that you were always interested in? Or was it simply like the first place that offered you an opportunity to write, so you jumped at it? Talk about that.
I did always love traveling. I like distinctly remember the first time that I left the country and just that feeling of how big the world was and like how small I was in comparison, and that being very exhilarating and just very eye-opening. And so I did always love that feeling of travel. And when I got the opportunity to do travel writing, and that I think is if you poll a bunch of people, that is like a dream career for a lot of people. And it was an incredible dream career for me. And I got to write and travel basically up until the pandemic.
So let's talk about 2018. So you start to write the measure in 2018, spare time, nights and weekends. You're still working as a travel writer. Talk to me about, at that moment, Nikki, how many people in your orbit knew that you were writing this book?
Oh, I mean, just my immediate family, just like my parents and my sister. And nobody, and I wrote a lot before I felt comfortable even like showing it to them to read because I was so nervous about it. And it's very hard to write while you are in a full-time job. I'm sure a lot of writers have that experience. And so I wasn't making a lot of progress. And also I wasn't telling anybody I was doing it.
So you mentioned only your family knew that you had set out to do this. What does it look like? Is there just some fevered moment that you come back from work and you like rip open your laptop and you say, okay, here it is? Or was it something that was developing in your mind for a long time? And then what did it look like? Was it, I'm going to come home and sit down every night after work and I'm going to work on this for 2 hours, paint the scene?
I wish I was that disciplined. I think it really, I mean, it was always obviously, as I said, this like dream in the back of my head, but not something I was actively putting pen to paper. And then I was called to jury duty in New York. And obviously jury duty involved just a lot of sitting around waiting to see if my name would get called. And I was reading Atonement by Ian McEwan while I was waiting. And I was like, please don't call my name because I need to finish this book. Like, please. I was like, I'm happy to do my civic duty, but like not right now. Like I need to finish this book. I'm so engrossed. I'm so moved. That was such a powerful reading experience for me that I went home that night and like created a little, I think I just like a legal pad of paper and was like ideas for a novel. And like those, I mean, it was so bad. It was like love story ? Family drama ? Like the most vague things you could think of.
Very broad.
Very broad, very broad. But I was attempting at that moment.
So you have it on the legal pad. And then how quickly do you get to a place where, was there one idea that ultimately was really that you were wrestling with that you said, I can't put this one down and this is what I'm going to write about? Or did that legal pad with a handful of broad ideas have like 3 or 4 more in-depth ideas that you were working on next?
Yeah, eventually in that brainstorming, I started thinking about like fate and destiny and like how much power we have in our lives. And that thinking about fate led me to the idea for the measure and the sort of the ancient Greek mythology around fate that inspired the measure. And I then continued writing my brainstorming on a legal pad, and I would bring the legal pad with me to work and keep it in my desk drawer. And like during my lunch break, if I was eating lunch at my desk, I would take out the legal pad and work on it and hope that like nobody looked over my shoulder.
So how far along would you say you were with that project, with that book, when 2020 strikes and you lose your job, you get laid off from your travel writing job and you move back into your childhood bedroom and your parents give you that nudge to, hey, stop the pity party. Maybe you should pick up that novel that you've been writing. How far along were you at that point?
I had the idea. I had the initial group of characters. I'd probably written like 20% of a manuscript at that point, but it had taken a year and a half to do that. And then, yeah, as you said, the travel industry got hit by the pandemic. I got laid off. I had a very strong pity party for myself. And I think probably one lesson that I learned there is like, okay, you can do that for a couple of days and then you've got to move on and you've got to sort of figure out the next step for yourself. And luckily, I did have my parents telling me the next step is this book. Like, you've been trying to write this book. Now you have nothing to do because you have no valuable skills during this moment of crisis. So you should just stay home and write this book.
All right, everyone. We'll get back to the conversation momentarily. But first, I want to tell you about my free weekly email newsletter, Tarp Pullers. Each week, I share an uplifting and inspirational tarp pulling story that is sure to brighten your day. And I also highlight some of the most powerful ideas I've learned on my journey talking to 200 and counting of the world's top performers. The newsletter is short, concise, and a reader recently told me this. She said it makes her day every time it hits her inbox. Go to everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter to sign up today.
So I'm curious, had any of that feeling of vulnerability or fear of that vulnerability crept in that period of time from 2018 to 2020 when you were writing this on the side? Or did you feel totally free and unencumbered?
I think because I was writing it without anybody reading it, I did feel pretty free, and I was really just writing for myself. And there was my own voices of self-criticism and self-doubt in my head of like, no one's ever going to read this. This isn't good. But I don't think I'll ever have the experience again that I had of writing that first book, where I had only my own voice in my head and not the voices of everybody else out there, because at that time I was so solitary, and it was this sort of special protected period.
Was there a point between then and the first reviews hitting for the measure when other noise started to get in, and what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, my mom and sister read the whole manuscript, and they're the ones who said that there could be something here. I think you should try to get an agent and try to publish this book.
Are they both pretty active readers?
They are, yeah. My mom is a super active reader, and my sister is a screenwriter, so different type of writing. So they're both very good. They're good readers, but I only had them pushing me along. Then all of a sudden you have an agent and an editor and a publicist and a marketing team and all these people. And then all of a sudden you have like Goodreads reviews and Amazon reviews before the book has even come out. And my agent told me, she was like, don't look at any of that. She was like, do not, I don't know if she could sense that I have a thin skin, but I do. And she was like, just for your own mental health, like, don't look at any of that. She told me to start writing another book, but I couldn't. And I know you've talked to other authors who are able to they're writing their next book already, but I couldn't write my next book until I had a sense of how the measure, if people were even going to read it.
Talk about that more for a moment, because that is interesting. You almost felt as though you needed to see what the response was to this one piece of art that you created at the first attempt before you felt like you could move on to the second.
I think so. I think I wanted to know, because at that time I had lost my job. And so at that time I was writing as my sole employment. And I think I needed to know, am I going to try to make it as a full-time writer? And is that going to work? Or do I need to go back to school maybe, or go try to get a different job? I just felt like I needed that structure, that path. And I had to wait. And I was just so nervous. I was so nervous too. I was just how can I write when I'm my head is filled with anxiety?
It's interesting. So then I'm curious, and we'll get into the success of the measure and the poppy fields and everything that you've been doing since. But just to stay on this idea for a moment, I just find it really interesting that you couldn't move on to another project until you saw the reception of this project. And then to have the reception be absolutely as remarkable as it was, I am wondering, did that suddenly create a new form of anxiety, that was almost made you a victim of your success? We were oh my goodness, it's an instant New York Times bestseller. This is am I ever going to be able to repeat this? And do I need to repeat this to feel like I'm a successful novelist? Talk about that.
Yeah, it was definitely a mistake. The way that I went about it was a mistake. I should not have waited. I shouldn't have, because then, as you said, I got very lucky and people did respond to the book. And then I felt trapped in I don't have another idea. And the measure, I think part of why it resonated was sort of a more unique concept that people were saying they hadn't seen before. And there was a lot of what's she going to think of next? And I was oh no. I was I don't know. I can't, I don't have another idea. And I was pretty sort of paralyzed in that for a period of time as well. And so I think looking back, I did something wrong.
Well, I don't know if you did something wrong, but you did something your way, and then you have to continue forth based upon the decisions that you make at the time. You made the best decision for yourself in the moment.
True.
So just to go back to 2022, again, the measure's released in 2022. As I mentioned, an instant New York Times bestseller. It was selected as the Jenna Butch Hager and Today Show's Read with Jenna book club pick, as well as the Barnes & Noble Discover pick. It's been translated in over 24 languages. Take me back to the moment where you realized that this thing might be a breakout success. Take me back to that moment, because up to this point, we've talked about a lot of the anxiety and a lot of the fear. Let's talk about that moment where you said, okay, I may have something here.
I think it was probably getting the phone call about the Today Show and Read with Jenna, because that was such a huge, it's Oprah's book club and Reese's book club and Jenna's book club were these huge, it's so transformative for you, especially if you were a first time writer like I was. So I think it was getting that call and I screamed and cried and just, there was a little bit of a sense of, okay, this isn't going to be like a total flop, but there was still a lot of work to be done and a lot of me having to go out of my comfort zone. But I think that moment I definitely felt some relief and some gratitude.
So take me back to inside that process a little bit, because I certainly don't have an appreciation for how that all plays out. So do you know at some point that you're one of 1,000 books that's being considered for that? And then maybe at some point that you're one of 10 books that's being considered for that? Like how, when that call comes, how big of a surprise, besides the fact that maybe you either wouldn't admit that you were expecting it or you never in a million years thought that it was going to turn out this way. How surprising was it?
I think there was a call in advance of that was like, someone from Jenna's team is reading it, which I almost wish they hadn't told me, because then I was spending weeks spiraling about that. My brain will spiral about anything that you give it. And so I had that at least. And then, but then getting the call just kind of out of the blue that it was happening, and it happens months prior and you have to keep it a secret. All of these big book pubs, you can't reveal it. And so then I spent the months being like, oh my gosh, somehow I'm going to spill the beans and I'm going to lose it. And it's going to be a nightmare scenario. And I only told my mom and my sister. I couldn't even tell my dad because he is not as good at keeping secrets as the rest of us.
So now I'm trying to gauge. So we've bookended this. 2022, it comes out. 2020, you put your head down in the middle of the pandemic in your parents' attic saying, I'm going to really focus on this. So that's a pretty short period of time by writing standards. So how many months from the time you put your head down and said, hey, I'm going to like devote all of my energy to this, did you feel like you had a near final manuscript?
Pretty fast, actually, because I had the initial idea already. And then because obviously that time in quarantine, like I had no other life. I had nothing else. I was writing for 10, 12 hours a day, not going anywhere. And so probably from March 2020 to maybe the fall of 2020, I felt like I had a full manuscript. And then I was able to get an agent, and she told me like, this is great, but you need to write like so much more. She was like, this manuscript is like 250 pages. This book needs to be 350 pages. And so that was like a rude awakening there. And so then I went back and wrote even more for the next 6 months.
Okay. So paint the scene for me. Like, what does it look like?
Yeah.
Talk about, like, do you have a sequence that you use to boot up your day, get into a creative zone? Talk about that.
Well, I'm never out at a crowded coffee shop, no matter what, because I need to write in like total silence and total solitude. I can't write if there's another human being around. And if I'm forced to, I need like to be blasting white noise in my ears and doing other things that are just to create like a little cone around me. And so writing for me it's very solitary, and it's really just me alone with like some tea, because I don't drink coffee. And so tea is my way of getting a small amount of caffeine. I think coffee drinkers would sort of scoff at the amount of caffeine in tea.
Well, me too. I'm an unsweetened black iced tea.
Nice, Sam. Yeah.
Maybe a matcha tea as well, which is in my mix. So other than the tea, my next question to you is, are there any objects in the space that you always have for inspiration? Is there a picture that you keep by you? Is there one of your favorite novels that you keep on your desk? A pen? I mean, you've mentioned the legal pad a few times. Maybe that's there with the laptop.
That's a really interesting question. Honestly, I often have like a little fidget toy, because in the moments that I'm not typing, I will start like fidgeting or something, and I need something to channel that sort of restless energy. And when I first started writing, no, I didn't have any other objects. Now I do have some objects that I've like gathered from the experience of the first 2 books that I have with me that are little like mementos from those books, but I don't know if I need them. They're just nice.
So you're writing in total solitude. You're blasting loud white noise if you have to be in a space with another human being. What about the idea generation? Do you ever break out of that solitary space when because like you talked about the jury duty and you had that legal pad, and those weren't very like in-depth ideas, but you were still creating ideas. Talk about that. Like when you're coming up with ideas, do you go somewhere else to a different type of environment? When you hit some type of writer block and don't know where you need to take a character arc in something that you're writing, do you go somewhere else? Talk about that.
I definitely take a lot of walks. And That's a big one for me. When I'm feeling blocked, I'll just go outside, and I'm fortunate that now I live in Southern California where I can do that year round. So walking is a big one for me. I also use music a lot to help. And I know a lot of people write with music in the background, but I can't have lyrics in the music because then I'm getting distracted by the lyrics and that's something else. But so I do just like instrumental music or like film scores. I'll use that to when I'm going on a walk, and I'll try to tailor it to like, if I know I'm trying to figure something out and it's like a really sad scene and I can't figure it out, I'll like play really sad instrumental music, like the soundtrack of Titanic or something. And like get myself in like a headspace of those emotions. And I feel like that's the thing that I do to manipulate myself almost. That's like the one trick I figured out.
It's so interesting. It resonates with me too. When I'm trying to work, I do enjoy having music on, but the lyrics for me as well I find very, very distracting.
Yeah.
And I'll put on some like jazz music or like classical music, or even sometimes like those ocean sounds.
Okay.
That works for me. But that's really interesting.
You should try film scores. They're cool.
I'm going to give that a try. And that idea of finding something that's thematically aligned with whatever you're working on, that is very interesting. How much of your creative process was something that you felt like you developed pretty early on in your life when you were working on more of those less formal projects and have stuck with, versus things that are things that as this has become more serious and has become your career that you've really needed to hone in on?
Yeah, I think like I've always just been loose and unstructured about things. And I think a lot of people read interviews with writers and they're like, I wake up at 5 a.m., I write from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m., then I do this. And like, that is not what my life looks like at all. And so it doesn't actually look that different than when I was younger and just playing around. It's like, it's either a good day and the juices are flowing and I'm writing for many, many hours, or it's a bad day and I don't force it. And I'm like not trying to hit a word count every single day. I'm very just go with the flow. So for all the unstructured people out there, I see you.
So you write about these big, weighty, like supernatural concepts. And one of the things, I love your writing and I love the stories that you tell. But I'm curious, like when you're writing about like a supernatural science fiction, almost oriented idea, is there a challenge to almost make it believable for the reader? Like, is that something that you're thinking about? Like, hey, I've got to make this big and supernatural so that it's interesting, but I also have to make it tangible and believable enough that people can connect with it. Talk about that. Is that something? Is that like a thing?
Definitely. I think because I'm not a like sci-fi writer and I'm not like writing new worlds or new planets or things where like it's meant to be unfamiliar to the reader. I am trying to write things that are set in our world, but some sort of like twist on our world. And so I do spend a lot of time trying to make everything around that one supernatural element, that one speculative element, feel super grounded in reality and feel very like, I recognize these streets. I recognize the way that people are talking. I like everything else about it. I try to keep super grounded so that you will bear with me when I throw that one like wild and maybe less believable thing at you, that you're like, okay, I'll go with her a little bit on this one sort of wacky thing because the rest of the world, I understand.
So when you're wrestling with these ideas, like when you've got that big kind of wacky wild wrench that you're throwing into the otherwise like relatable world that we're all reading about, are you saying to yourself, like, is that vulnerability that you talked about and that doubt creeping in and you're saying like, nobody is ever going to buy this, or like not buy the book, like nobody's going to ever buy this idea?
Yeah, I definitely had with The Measure, which is more supernatural than my second book. I definitely had a moment where after I sent it out to agents, that's when the panic crept in. And I was like, oh, I already pressed send on all those emails. Are people going to be like, this is the wildest thing I've ever read? Like, what is she talking about? And so then there was a moment of panic until I got like, and I got some emails back that were like, I can't wrap my head around it. And then when I did get one email back that was like, oh, I'm on board, I was like, okay, as long as there's one person out there who's on board, that's the proof.
That is the proof. It's interesting how like so many of the high performers that I talk to in different crafts, whether it be in sports, in media, entertainment, authors like yourself, they talk about how like you could get 99 kind of positive affirmations about the work that you're doing and what you're creating. And then that one kind of that questions you, or that one negative, that's the one that really, really gnaws at you. And you may feel that way too, but it does sound like the affirmation along the way has been very, very important for you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything they say, that like you could read 5 wonderful things and then one not so wonderful thing. And like that, I'm up all night thinking about that not so wonderful thing. And I do have trouble separating like my work from myself. And I think that is something that I hope over the course of my career I can get better at. But I do have trouble if I come across something and someone says, oh, I hated this book. My body interprets that as I hate this person. And I just take it super, super personally. And I'm not saying that out there to like tell people not to critique the book and feel how they feel. Obviously you can. But yeah, I need to personally get better at that, at kind of creating more of a separation between like my identity as a person and my writing.
I guess 2-part question in response to that. Are there things that you have done to help yourself get a little bit better at that over the past couple of years? And then the second part of that question is, what else are you doing in order to try and get a little bit better at that?
Yeah, I mean, well, I've gone to therapy, so that's one. And I've also, I think, just tried to build out the other parts of my life as well. And like writing such a huge, huge part of my life, but like having other hobbies and having friends and like spending time with your family, like those other things that fill your bucket, I think are a main way to realize that your life is so much bigger than what you do. And so if not everyone likes what you do, that's okay. You've got all this other good stuff in your life.
What are some of the Nikki Erlick hobbies?
Right now, the big one is pickleball, which I know is like the national hobby at the moment, but it is the big one because I used to play tennis and now I've started playing pickleball and it's very fun.
What do you find most enjoyable? I'm not questioning it at all because it is the phenomenon.
I think like it's something that like I'm okay at, but I'm not amazing at. And so I don't have to be competitive about it because I'm never going to be the best at pickleball. So it's low stakes. It can just be fun. And it's something that I feel like I've introduced other people to it and I've been like, let's all go play together. And it's like, there's kind of like a low barrier to entry. Like you just need some minimal hand-eye coordination and you can do it. So I feel like it's a nice thing that can kind of gather people together.
So Nikki, back to your writing. So your latest book, The Poppy Fields, was released in June of 2025. Now talk to me about that. Now, was that the next idea that you had after The Measure that you were afraid to embark on? When did the idea come up for The Poppy Fields?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I had a lot of trouble thinking of a new idea after The Measure. And then The Measure came out. It was dedicated to my grandparents, who I mentioned taught me how to read. And I was so, so deeply grateful they were there to see that book come out. And then just a few weeks after it came out, my grandmother passed away. And so that feeling like this time of my life had like the highest of highs with my dream coming true and this book coming out, and then like the lowest of lows with losing someone who I loved so deeply. That kind of mix of emotions put me in the headspace then of coming up with the idea of The Poppy Fields, which is a book about a scientist who invents a cure for grief. And it was born very directly out of a time of grief in my life and my family's life. And so The Measure was a book that it was personal in the sense that characters are drawing on me and things like that, but the roots of the book were not personal the way the roots of The Poppy Fields were so deeply personal. And writing that book was an even more emotional experience for me because of that kind of deep connection to what I was going through as a human being while I was writing it.
And while you're going through all of this, you've got a poster on your bedroom wall with a scene from The Wizard of Oz. And that's where you see Judy Garland as Dorothy asleep among the poppies.
Yes.
And you say, this is what it's going to be.
Yeah. I was going through the grieving process. All I wanted to do was sleep. I think anybody who's gone through grief or heartbreak at the end of a relationship, like you just kind of want to stay in bed all day. And all I wanted to do was sleep. And I saw Dorothy asleep in the poppy fields. And I thought, what if there was a place where you could sleep through pain, sleep through heartbreak? And I'm going to call that place the poppy fields.
So Nikki, I'm curious, as you think about like these two works, and we talked a lot like a few minutes ago about this idea that you really couldn't come up with an idea for the second book until you saw what the response was to the first book. And that was really something that you wrestled with. Talk about, as you write The Poppy Fields, it's this incredibly deep emotional experience for you for all the reasons that you just described. You get to the end of that process and the book's about to be released to the world. Are the emotions different, the same? Talk about how it compared to when you were releasing your debut novel.
Yeah, I think the emotions, they were different mostly because, because this one was so much more personal, and also because I knew that people would be reading it in comparison to the first book. And I had a lot of people be like, are you going to write a sequel to The Measure? And this was obviously not a sequel. And so I feel like there was a lot of other kind of noise around this coming out that I had to not focus on. But this second book, just allowed me to connect with people on a deeper level than The Measure even did, because it is a book born from my personal experience of grief. And so many people who read it and really connected with it wanted to share their experience of grief with me. And so that it took on a different afterlife than The Measure.
What is that like when people reach out to you or at a book signing tell you that they connected with your work, not just because they enjoyed it, but because it meant something so deeply to them personally based upon something that they had gone through or something that they had experienced? And as you noted, that I'm sure that happens a ton with The Poppy Fields, but The Measure too.
Yes, totally.
I'm sure that sparks a lot of thinking and a lot of thought provocation for people as well. What does that feel like when a reader enters your kind of solitary space as a writer and connects with it in some way?
Yeah, it was so unexpected for me because I grew up reading, I guess, in a time when authors weren't really as accessible. There wasn't social media. There wasn't, you weren't seeing what an author was eating for breakfast every day. It was just different. And by the time I was about to publish my first book, I also didn't really have social media. It wasn't a thing. I didn't feel like it was a part of my life. And my publisher was like, you should get on Instagram. There's a lot of readers on Instagram. I think you'll find it interesting. And I did. And thank God I did, because that's where I connect with so many readers now. And people coming up to me in signing lines too. It can be difficult because I'll have someone come up to me and we're having a super emotional conversation. Maybe we're both crying. And then they walk away and somebody else comes up to me and they want to have a very cheerful, humorous conversation. And I need to switch gears really fast. I mean, it's such an honor. And the power of reading to me is that it can make you feel less alone. And so then to see that in action of both of us together feeling less alone in what we went through is just miraculous.
Yes, it's so powerful. It's just so powerful to think about. Now, I'm curious, this is a question I like to ask a lot of writers as well, is this idea that you're obviously a reader, you love to read. Do you find yourself wrestling with comparison game with other writers? I wish I could do more like they do it, or, oh, how did they frame it that way? Do you wrestle with that at all? Or no? Is it more of a self-inflicted kind of battle that you're having with yourself?
Yeah. Most of my torture is self-inflicted, but I think there's definitely a little bit of sometimes when I'm in between coming up with ideas or having a strong bout of writer's block, I'll go read other books. And sometimes it's super inspiring and it really unlocks something in me. And other times I'll read something and be like, well, this is just so good. I'm never going to write anything as good at this. I should just quit. Why do I even keep going? And so it can have the opposite effect, but I really do feel it's, for me, it's very much a battle with my own mind and my own kind of self-criticism. And mostly I just find reading other writers to be very inspiring.
So Nikki, as we get ready to wrap up our conversation, and I could ask you questions for hours, but as we get ready to wrap up our conversation today, I am curious. So what would you say, if you had to pick one kind of little change or little thing that you do in your work that has made a really significant impact, a seemingly little thing that's had this outsized impact, what would you say it is?
I think it is a willingness to go outside of your comfort zone for the sake of your passion, your career. As I mentioned, I was very anti-social media, but then I went on it and it's given me this great kind of gift. I have terrible stage fright and public speaking makes me nauseous and sweaty. But sometimes as an author, you have to go do events and do public speaking. And so I had to just throw myself into that for the sake of this career that I've chosen. And so I think that has helped me even more on a personal level than necessarily on a professional level, just like that, oh, I can do things that I didn't think I could do before. I can tackle things that make me uncomfortable.
So aside from being able to tackle things that maybe you once thought were impossible or would make you feel uncomfortable, that now you've gotten more comfortable, what would you say has been the most surprising piece of the last 4, 5, 6 years of your personal and professional journey?
Oh, wow. I think it is a little bit just what I said earlier, just like the connection that exists now between readers and writers that I didn't think existed or perhaps just wasn't aware of. And that it's this dialogue that, like, I thought a writer writes a book, you put it out in the world, and then like the dialogue comes in book clubs where people are reading it together. But it's actually, there's a dialogue between readers and the writers as well. And I think that has been surprising and very special. And I now have like people that are like my Instagram friends who are readers and like will chat about other things too. Like what TV shows are watching, other things. But we only met because they read my book and like posted a review and tagged me in it, you know?
It's just so cool to think about the incredible work that you have put out into the world, but the emotions and the ideas and the thoughts that it has sparked in so many others and millions of readers around the world, and that you're forever connected with all of them because of the work that you put out into the universe. Yeah. Nikki, what would you say, even with all the success that you've had, what would you say today is your biggest area for growth professionally as a writer?
Wow,
like the biggest area of like future growth, like the biggest opportunity for growth.
I mean, there's just so much. I hope that every time I write a new book, somebody says like, oh, she's become I can see that she's becoming a better writer. And that I've read other authors being interviewed and they say that they like look back and reread something that they wrote 20 years ago. And they're like, wow, why did I use so many adjectives? Or why did I do it like, oh my gosh, like I've grown so much. And I think hopefully I can look back. Hopefully I'm blessed enough to have a long career and I can look back and read these first books and be like, okay, those were good, but like I'm so much of a stronger writer now.
What is one thing, Nikki, you would tell 6 or 7-year-old Nikki not to spend so much time worrying about that maybe consumed a lot of your headspace over the years? We've talked about a few different things that had lived in your mind that you've had to wrestle with, but is there one thing in particular that you would say, don't worry about that so much?
Probably just the general, like, stop sweating the small stuff. Like it was just, I mean, I still do that, but like just 6, 7-year-old Nikki would have been like, those people, they're having a birthday party and like, I'm not there. And just thinking that was like the end of the world, you know, and thinking that I got a bad grade on that paper that I thought I did a good job on. This is the end of the world. Like, I'm not going to go to college or something, you know, like, I think just like taking everything 10 notches down would probably be the best advice. And I could probably still use a little bit of that today.
Well, Nikki, this conversation has been so much fun. I am so grateful that you spent some time with me this week and we've gotten to dig into your story and your work and the way you go about your business. It's just, like I said, you put such incredibly beautiful work out into the world. And it's just been so much fun going behind the scenes a little bit to understand how you think, the ideas that you wrestle with, the frameworks that you're using to do your work. And without any hesitation, there is no question in my mind that you are a tarp puller, a certified member of the Everybody Pulls the Tarp family forever. There is no question in my mind. Nikki Erlick, you are a tarp puller. Thank you for spending some time with me this week. All right, Nikki, we'll have to do a part 2 sometime.
Yes, thank you. Very, very honored to be part of this community and share these values. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nikki. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Instagram at AndrewMoses123 and sign up for my email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Until next time, keep pulling the tarp.